Now, talking about one of those teams potentially having played themselves out of the NCAA tournament, the ESPN bracketology has not updated since Nebraska played that Tuesday game.
Yeah.
Got down big again.
Yep.
Climbed all the way back. It goes to overtime. It goes to a second overtime. And ultimately, it's a 116 to 114 loss. Bryce Williams with 43. That is a single game program record. I think he would have traded in not having that record for making that second free throw at the end of regulation. And you don't know if Ohio State gets a better shot, knowing that you have to get a shot off instead of, okay, we can go to overtime. There's a lot can change. I understand that. But 100 times out of 100, you take Bryce Williams at the line down one with mere seconds to go. Like you absolutely take that. And Ohio State went 1 for 2 at the end of the first overtime. You had the same situation come up twice. It was very weird. But Nebraska had its opportunities late. There's I talked about it on the watch party. Well, we talked a lot about it on the watch party once I got my power restored and I was able to jump back on with those guys. The officiating was very questionable in a lot of very key moments.
Yes.
A lot of very key moments. There should have been at least one, if not two, technical fouls.
There should have been two.
The intentional foul on Bryce Williams, which was a 4-point possession for Ohio State. You got the foul on Aaron Eulis instead of the violation on the inbound in the second overtime. And all of those, you don't know how things play out if those calls are made. I get that. Even the very last one there. You don't call a foul on Eulis. You call the inbound violation or whatever it's called in the rule book. Nebraska still has to make a 3, down by 3. But that's still different than there being a foul and Bryce Williams hits a 3, but you're down by 5. It's still very different. There's still a chance. It felt like at times the chances were taken away from Nebraska, and in other moments it felt like Nebraska didn't take advantage of the chances they had.
I think that's absolutely fair. I think you have to start off with what you just ended with. The opportunities that presented itself for Nebraska, especially at the end, that they unfortunately did not take advantage of. The officials, I'm with everybody on that. The technicals, yes, they should have been called. Two of them. Yeah. I mean, it's called all the time in basketball. You cannot spike the basketball. I don't care if it's Thornton. I don't care who it is. You can't do that. That is called all the time. But the one that if I had hair, I would have been pulling it out was what should have been the inbound violation.
Yeah.
You can move 3 feet. I think you have a little 3-foot window there. Yeah. But my God, that was more than 3 feet. And it was so obvious because there's an official right there. The guy that hands the ball to him is right there. He's supposed to be watching that. My problem is not necessarily, that lost the game for Nebraska, because I don't believe that. I truly don't believe that. But these are the guys that are officiating big boy basketball, big college basketball, and miss that many, what I think are elementary calls. You're missing that many. That staff hopefully had a very, 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 very serious talking to from their supervisors, because that was an atrocious showing. And I'm sure there were probably things that went against went against Ohio State that we're not even talking about too. I'm not trying to say this was slanted all against Nebraska. I don't want to make it, they're against Nebraska. No, these were just basic calls that were missed. And that's unfortunate, especially when you have two teams that are playing for their tournament lives, that you have to deal with that. At the very least, the last thing I wanted to hear about was any type of officiating presence in this game. And unfortunately, it is part of this game. Now, having said all of that, what happened again, Kaleb? Nebraska, as you mentioned, they dig themselves in a deep hole. They're cold shooting in the first half. Bjorkengel is nowhere to be found offensively. If you would have told me that Bryce would have given you 30 plus and Juwan Gary would have given you 20 and Connor Essegian would be in double figures, I would have said they win this game going away.
Mm-hmm.
But defensively, there were some breakdowns. And I do want to say this about the defense. Ohio State at times they just had Nebraska's number. And at some point, you just tip your cap and say, good on you guys. That is tough to defend. But at the end of regulation, and I thought in a lot of overtime 1 and 2, with what they had in the tank, Nebraska's defensive effort was clearly there.
Yeah.
They were in the paint, then they were recovering, there were closeouts. There were some shots there because you bring up Bryce Williams I'll use this as an example. I was ready. I had a tweet already in my head of, he may have missed that free throw at the end of regulation, but I remember thinking, hey, if playoff Jimmy's a thing, overtime Bryce is a thing too, because he was just taking over like he did in the.
He was taking like all the shots. He had the first 5 points.
Yeah, and he couldn't miss. And there were sometimes like, pass it. Okay, don't pass it. That's a good shot. But then Ohio State started to find some better looks, and they would make that extra pass. They would find Thornton, and I thought some really creative ways where it wasn't like, well, Nebraska should always have eyes on him. No, they just did really good work off the ball, a lot of good screen work off the ball. And I just think if anybody's going to be critical of Nebraska's defense, they're at the end of the first half and into overtime. At the very least, you could not question their effort. I mean, they were flying all over the place. It was just Ohio State was finding different ways. So credit Ohio State for doing that, of being able to get some desperate buckets that they had. Otherwise, that first overtime was going to be a blowout. Nebraska going to win in a blowout if they didn't do something. So it was, though, the defense there kind of in the start of the second half, it wasn't in sync. They weren't connected. Offensively in the first half is what sunk them. And unfortunately, Caleb, this has been a trend. This is what I've been saying for the last 2 weeks is this offense concerns me because when they can't keep pace, go use that Washington game, for example, when a team is shooting at a blistering pace, but you're keeping up, you're fine. And that's what Nebraska did in that game. That's why they eventually won, because Washington came back down to the mean. When they're not doing that, and they're continuing to see a 4-point deficit, then it grows to an 8-point deficit, then a 10, then a 12, because they're having empty possessions. And all of a sudden they're starting to not use the shot clock, but all of a sudden they're just chucking it. And Bryce, God love him, he is a great player. At times, I think feels he needs to take that shot no matter what's going on in overtime, especially in that second overtime. There are a lot of times like, oh my God, Bryce, that's not a good shot right there. Connor Essegian's over there. Juwan, the last shot, one of the last shots, I think at the end of the first overtime, Juwan Gary was open on the wing. I would have rather him take that shot than Bryce trying to get contact and sort of throwing up a desperation heave. I didn't love that shot. So as much as he's been good, I think at times he feels the offensive onus is on him and he needs to take over.
Yeah, even with that, I don't feel like he shot enough. I still don't think. I know he scored 43, tied the program record with, I think it was 16 made field goals in the game. There are still so many times, especially early on.
Yes. I'm with you.
Early, we know what we've seen. Alpha Bryce, late game Bryce. Yep. You can still do that late game. Do it early game for me too. Not just me, but all of us. Yeah. Because I feel like get him 25 to 30 shots and you're not taking 20 of them in the last 10 minutes. Spread them out a little bit more.
Right.
And I think it's really good because if he can come out and do that early, it does open up a lot of those Juwan Gary, Connor Essegian, even Sam Hoiberg on hitting a lot of those things.
Let me ask you this real quick. The play that I'm talking about there, where he takes it himself, goes into double team, it just wasn't a good looking shot. No. It was a tough shot. Juwan Gary open on that left wing on the top of our screen as we're watching at home. I do wonder how much, because remember, there were a lot of people that were critical of when he gave up that. I'm trying to remember, who it was against? I'm trying to remember the team. It wasn't that long ago where he gave it up to Connor Essegian and Essegian missed. People were like,
yeah. That was just the not the Minnesota game just a couple of games ago, but it was last week.
Yeah. And people were like, oh, Bryce got to take that. Bryce got to take that. Well, this time he does, and now Yahoo's like me, are like, come on, give it up, man. Give it up to Juwan Gary. So I do wonder if he's like, okay, now I'm taking this. I'm not giving it up. Again, this is not a Bryce. Bryce is all about Bryce. Michigan. Not at all. Michigan, thank you. Yes, that's the game. Bryce is all about Bryce. No, that's not the case. It's just, I think when the offense is tough to come by, I think he does feel a little bit of that pressure that he needs to be the guy. And in a lot of times he does need to be the guy.
So ESPN has not updated since Tuesday, but some of our other favorites like JBR bracketology, T3 bracketology, I've seen the conversations. I will say it tomorrow on Nebrasketball Brunch. It will be a very, very low confidence rating in this team making it back to the NCAA tournament. However, there apparently remains a path.
Sure.
And that path begins on Sunday. It's not just win the Big Ten tournament.
No.
That path is actually win on Sunday and get at least 2 in the Big Ten tournament. Mm-hmm. So then you're at 20 wins and you're squarely on the bubble. I think you'll still be sweating it out on Selection Sunday, but there's the path, Husker fans. However, you have to win on Sunday for that to happen. Win on Sunday. Here's the easy math on talking about the Big Ten tournament bubble. Win on Sunday and you're going to Indianapolis. Nothing else matters across the league. You don't have to be score watching. Win on Sunday and you are in the Big Ten tournament. If you don't win, there is a slim path to making the Big Ten tournament, and then you do have to be scoreboard watching. You got one of them last night. USC won last night. That helps you. Other things that have to happen. USC is going to have to beat UCLA on Saturday. Minnesota lost last night. You need Minnesota to beat Rutgers on Sunday. You also need Northwestern to lose to Maryland. If you can have those things happen, regardless of Sunday's result, if you lose on Sunday, Nebraska is in the Big Ten tournament as the 15 seed. It's a very slim path. It is teams that I do not trust at the bottom of the league.
Right.
But if you're there saying, no, they can lose, and they're still, someone tried telling me this on Facebook when I wrote a story about the Big Ten bubble the other day. No, Nebraska, even if they lose Sunday, they're likely in. I'm sorry. Nebraska has lost 4 in a row. That would be 5 in a row.
Right.
At the very bottom of the league.
You'd have to win the conference tournament.
Yeah. So, in talking about being in the Big Ten tournament, the Nebraska would be in if they lose on Sunday. There are so many pieces have to fall into place. And yes, you got one of them last night. But if you're going to start banking on all of these pieces in this final weekend, you're not going to play in Indianapolis. By the way, Nebraska, the last time didn't play in a conference tournament was 1976. That was the last year before they started playing the Big 8 tournament. I looked it up. So, easy math. Easy for everybody. Win on Sunday, and you're going to Indianapolis, and you're leaving yourself a little bit of that door cracked open to still go to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, because I feel like most bracketologists, when Nebraska loses their percentage, obviously, I think on Bubble Watch went down to 25% of making the tournament, but 25% still gives them a puncher's chance if they win, and they have to. They've got to win on Sunday, but regardless of whether you want to see this team in the Big Ten tournament, of what scenarios could play out or not, if you're going to make anything short of having to win the Big Ten tournament, you've got to win on Sunday. If they win, though, what that percentage looks like, because it does seem like people continue to gravitate to Nebraska. I'm still looking at certain smaller brackets or bracketologists that maybe don't get the same type of run as a Lenardi or a Jerry Palm that still have Nebraska as an 11 seed playing in the play-in game, playing out in Dayton. And that is after the loss to Ohio State. Yeah. Shelby Mast, Bracket Wag is one that has Nebraska still in despite the recent struggles. I just feel that a lot of the bracketologists, and if they're in sync with the committee, they just want to see something here in the last week from Nebraska. Yes, just give us something to validate why we want you in the tournament. We know that your fans will travel and everything, but we can't do this if you keep losing freaking basketball games. And that one on Tuesday was such a gut punch because it did feel like everything we're all consumed with right now of Nebraska either making it or not making the NCAA tournament. That was a hell of a game. That really was a hell of a game. And Nebraska did a lot of good things there too. Not only get back into the game, but eventually take the lead. What they were doing in overtime, as I mentioned, there was some real good effort on the defensive side, and to fall short, that to me was such a gut punch. If anybody but Iowa is coming to Pinnacle Bank Arena, I would be really worried about how Nebraska responds. The fact that it's Iowa, and given not only the rivalry part of it, but what happened in Iowa City where Nebraska let one get away, there is no way this team should be still licking their wounds.
Senior Day, Sunday, 11:30 a.m. tip from Pinnacle Bank Arena. Pack that place. I will be there. This team wins, and there's that hope. It's the hope that kills you, as they say in Ted Lasso, but it's also that hope that keeps you going. And in the NCAA tournament, the committee wants to see a pulse. So let's hope Nebraska gets a little bit of a pulse at Pinnacle Bank Arena on Sunday.